Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Baidu's 2023 annual report.
Oh, yeah.
So, if you've been following the show, you know that we like to roll up our sleeves,
Mm-hmm.
get into the weeds.
That's right.
And this report, folks, it's dense.
It is. It's a long one.
A lot to unpack.
Yeah, a lot of fascinating insights to uncover. So to make sure we don't miss anything,
Yeah.
we're going to break it down into three digestible chunks. First, we're going to explore Baidu's various business segments.
Right.
Get a feel for what they're actually doing.
Mm.
Then we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of their
Oh,
financials.
let's go look at the numbers.
Got to see how all those ventures are translating into, dollars and cents.
Exactly. Bottom line.
Right. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at what they're doing for their shareholders.
Yeah.
Dividends, buybacks, that kind of stuff.
Got to keep the investors happy. Exactly. So with that roadmap in mind, let's jump right in. So, Baidu. Most people probably just think search engine, right?
Yeah, the Google of China.
But their business is way more diverse than that.
Oh, absolutely. It's a real ecosystem they've built.
Yeah, and a pretty sprawling one at that.
Mm.
So let's start with what seems to be their core, their mobile ecosystem.
Right. That's kind of their home base.
Yeah, their foundation.
Yeah.
So how would you describe their mobile ecosystem? What's the gist of it?
So imagine a massive funnel, right? They pull in users at the top,
Okay.
engage them with all sorts of content and services.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the bottom of the funnel, those engagements lead to transactions. It's a really effective model.
And they've got a huge user base to work with.
Massive. Their Baidu app alone had something like 667 million monthly active users by the end of 2023.
667 million.
Yeah.
That's mind-boggling.
It is. A lot of people.
That's like more than the entire population of the European Union.
Yeah, that's a lot of eyeballs.
And it's not just the Baidu app, right? They've got what, Haoan for short videos?
Uh-huh. Hyokan, Baidu Post for forums, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, they're really covering a lot of ground.
They are. It's like they're creating a whole digital world within their ecosystem.
Yeah, it's impressive. So they've got all these users hooked, but how are they actually making money from this ecosystem?
So that's where those transactions come in. They connect users with businesses and service providers,
Okay.
generating revenue through advertising and other marketing solutions.
Ah, so they're leveraging their massive reach to become this go-to platform for businesses wanting to reach Chinese consumers.
Precisely. It's a very smart strategy.
It is. Okay, next up we've got their AI cloud, which seems to be a big area of focus for them.
Huge, yeah. They're betting big on AI.
So what exactly does their AI cloud entail?
So they've got two main branches. One caters to enterprises and the public sector,
Okay.
providing all sorts of AI-powered solutions for businesses and government agencies.
Mhm.
And the other focuses on personal cloud storage, for individual users.
So like your typical cloud storage, but with AI sprinkled on top.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that the enterprise side is really starting to take off.
Oh, really? So businesses are really buying into Baidu's AI capabilities.
No, they are. And for a good reason, too. Baidu has a few key advantages in this space.
Like what?
Well, first of all, their deep roots in search and data analysis give them access to a ton of data to train their AI models.
Right. Data's king in the AI world.
Absolutely. Second, they've invested a lot in developing their own AI chips.
So they're not reliant on third-party providers.
Nope. They control the whole stack, which gives them an edge in terms of performance and cost efficiency.
Smart move.
And finally, they've really tailored their AI solutions to the specific needs of Chinese businesses.
So it's not just generic AI tools, it's more customized solutions.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. So they've got the data, the hardware, and the localized expertise. But how are they actually growing this segment?
Well, they've been really strategic about cross-selling and upselling within their AI cloud.
So they get a customer hooked on one service and then show them the value of adding more sophisticated tools.
Exactly. It's all about building those long-term relationships and becoming an indispensable partner for their clients.
I see. It's a smart approach.
Huh?
Now let's move on to something I'm personally curious about, IQIYI.
Ah, yes, the Netflix of China.
Exactly. I'm fascinated by this whole streaming wars thing.
It's a competitive market.
It is. So how does IQII's business model work? Is it all about subscriptions like Netflix?
Well, membership services are definitely a big part of their revenue,
Mm-hmm.
but they also generate income through online advertising and content distribution.
Oh, so they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Nope, they've got a diversified approach, which is always a good sign.
It is, and it looks like their membership base is pretty healthy.
It is, yeah. In 2023, their average daily subscribing members reached 111.9 million.
Up from 103.1 million the year before.
Yep, they're gaining ground.
Okay, impressive numbers. Now let's talk about Xiaodu.
Xiaodu, their smart devices brand.
Right, they're making a big push into this space.
They are. They've got smart speakers, smart displays, all sorts of AI-powered gadgets for the home.
It seems like every tech company is trying to get a piece of the smart home market.
It's a hot market right now, a lot of potential for growth.
So are they actually making money from Xiaodu yet, or is it more about gaining market share at this point?
It's a bit of both, to be honest. They're still exploring different business models for Xiaodu.
So they're experimenting, seeing what sticks.
Exactly. They're trying out memberships, advertising, revenue-sharing partnerships with third-party skill developers.
It makes sense to be flexible in such a new market.
It does, yeah. They're trying to figure out what resonates best with consumers.
And what's clever is how they're using Xiaodu not just as a standalone product, but also as a gateway to their broader ecosystem.
Right. It's all connected.
Yeah, so you buy a Xiaodu smart speaker, and suddenly you're more likely to use the Baidu app, try out IQIYI.
Exactly. It's all part of the strategy.
Smart.
Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up this section, I want to quickly touch on a few other Baidu Core products that caught my eye. Let's see, Baidu Wiki.
Like a Chinese Wikipedia?
Yeah, exactly. And then they've got Baidu Knows, kind of like a Q&A platform.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Paddle, which is their open source deep learning platform.
Yeah, their answer to TensorFlow or PyTorch.
So they're really covering a lot of bases.
They are. It's a very diverse portfolio.
It is. But let's not forget that operating in all these different markets comes with its own set of challenges.
Oh, for sure. It's not all smooth sailing.
So what are some of the hurdles they're facing?
Well, the competition is fierce in every arena they play in. The smart device market is particularly crowded.
Yeah, everybody and their grandma is making smart speakers these days.
It seems like it.
Yeah.
And attracting new customers for their online marketing services is an ongoing battle.
Right. They can't just rest on their laurels. They need to constantly innovate and adapt.
Absolutely, especially with the rapid pace of technological advancement.
Yeah. And then there's the whole uncertainty surrounding AI. The report talks about foundation models and generative AI, but how those technologies will be commercialized is still a big question mark.
That's true. It's still early days for those technologies.
But they're betting big on it.
They are, which makes sense. AI has the potential to revolutionize so many industries.
It does. But it also comes with its own set of risks. The regulatory environment for AI is constantly evolving, especially in China.
Yeah, that's a big factor to consider.
It is. So they've got these challenges, but amidst those challenges, there are also some huge opportunities.
Oh, absolutely. The smart device market is still growing rapidly, and their AI cloud business has the potential to become a global player.
Yeah, who knows what the future holds for foundation models and generative AI. If they can figure out how to monetize those technologies, the sky's the limit.
It's an exciting time to be in the tech industry, that's for sure.
It is. All right, so we've explored Baidu's diverse business segments, but now I'm curious to see how these ventures translate into, cold, hard cash. Let's dive into their financials and see what the numbers tell us.
Let's do it.
I love a good spreadsheet.
Me too. Let's crunch some numbers.
All right, let's get into it.
All right, so we've gotten a good overview of their different business segments, but now let's get into the nitty-gritty of their financials.
Yeah, let's see how those ventures are translating into, cold, hard cash.
Exactly. Time for some number crunching.
All right, so let's start with the big picture. Revenue. How did Baidu do in 2023?
So their total revenue for 2023 was RMB 134.6 billion.
Okay, that's a pretty big number.
Yeah, that translates to about US $19.0 billion.
All right, so almost 20 billion in revenue.
Yeah, and that's a 9% increase compared to 2022.
So a decent bump in revenue.
Yeah, not too shabby.
Not bad at all. But where's all this money coming from? What are the main sources of this revenue?
So the majority of their revenue comes from their online marketing services.
So like advertising and stuff?
Exact.
Okay, and how did that segment perform?
Pretty well, actually. Online marketing revenues for Baidu Core, which is basically their main search business, increased by 8%.
Okay, so steady growth there.
Yeah, and that was largely due to recovering demand in a few key industries.
Like what?
So travel, e-commerce, healthcare, and entertainment and media.
So those sectors bounced back. And Baidu's ad revenue followed suit.
Pretty much, yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about IQII? How did their streaming platform contribute to the revenue picture?
So IQIYI also saw a pretty impressive jump in online marketing revenue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it went up by 17%, reaching RMB 6.2 billion.
Wow, so even more growth than Baidu Core.
Yep, and that was primarily driven by their performance-based advertising.
So they're doing a good job of monetizing their platform through ads.
Yeah, they're not just relying on subscriptions.
Smart. Now, the report also mentioned other revenues, which is kind of a catch-all category. But it sounds like that segment primarily includes their cloud and AI-powered businesses.
Exactly. And this segment also saw a solid 9% increase in revenue.
Okay, so all their major segments are growing.
Yep, they're firing on all cylinders.
That's good to hear. But revenue is only half the story, right? We also need to look at expenses to get the full picture.
Absolutely. Profitability is key.
So let's talk expenses. How did they manage their costs in 2023?
Well, their total operating costs did increase by 5% to RMB 112.7 billion.
Okay, so their expenses went up, but not as much as their revenue.
That's right.
So that's good, right?
Yeah, it means their profit margins are improving.
Oh, okay, I see. But what exactly drove that increase in expenses?
So there were a couple of key factors. First, their selling, general, and administrative expenses, or SG&A, those jumped up by 15%.
Oh, wow, that's a pretty big increase.
It is, yeah. And a lot of that was due to increased spending on channel development and promotional marketing.
So they're investing heavily in attracting new customers and expanding their reach.
That's right. It's an aggressive strategy, but it seems to be paying off.
Yeah, if their revenue growth is any indication.
Exactly.
And what was the second factor driving the increase in expenses?
So, research and development expenses also went up.
Okay, that makes sense. They need to keep innovating.
Yeah, especially in the AI space, which is moving so fast.
So how much did their R&D expenses increase?
By 4%.
All right, not as dramatic as the SG&A increase, but
Yeah.
still significant.
Yeah, they're putting a lot of resources into developing new technologies.
Makes sense. All right, now for the moment of truth. Net income. After all those revenues and expenses are tallied up, what's the bottom line for Baidu?
So their net income for 2023 came in at RMB 21.549 billion.
Okay, and how does that translate into US dollars?
That's about US $3.036 billion.
All right, so over $3 billion in profit.
Yeah, that's a pretty healthy profit margin.
Not bad at all. But I'm curious, what were the key factors driving this profitability? Was it just the revenue growth, or did they also implement some cost-saving measures?
It was a bit of both, actually.
Okay, so they're both growing their top line and becoming more efficient.
Exactly. They're focused on both sides of the equation.
Smart. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about cash flow. How's Baidu's cash situation looking?
So their cash flow statement shows that they generated RMB 26.2 billion in net cash from operating activities in 2023.
Okay, and what does that tell us?
Well, it basically means that their core business operations are generating a lot of cash.
Which is a good sign, right?
Yeah, it shows they're financially healthy.
Good to know. But I noticed that their net cash used in investing activities was quite high in 2023.
Yeah, it was RMB 50.4 billion.
Should we be concerned about that?
Not necessarily. A large chunk of that cash outflow was for held-to-maturity investment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a finance expert, so you're going to have to break that down for me.
So these are basically investments that Baidu plans to hold for the long term.
Ah, okay. So it's not like they're burning through cash on risky ventures.
Nope. It's more about strategically managing their assets for long-term growth.
Yeah. Okay, I see. So they're playing the long game.
That's right.
Now, what about capital expenditures? Are they planning any major investments that could impact their cash flow moving forward?
Yeah, they actually expect their capital expenditures to increase in the coming years.
Oh, really? For what?
So they mentioned network infrastructure expansion, new office buildings, and cloud computing data centers.
So big ticket items?
Yeah, they're gearing up for some serious growth.
It sounds like it. But where's all this money going to come from? Are they going to need to raise capital or take on more debt?
They're actually planning to fund these investments with their existing cash and the cash flow they expect to generate from operations.
So they're confident they can handle it without going outside for more funding?
Yeah, they're self-sufficient.
Okay, well, that's good to know. It means they're not planning to dilute shareholder value by issuing more stock or take on more debt.
Yeah, those are definitely good signs for investors.
They are. But speaking of investors, what about us? Are they planning to reward shareholders with dividends or share buybacks?
Yeah, let's get into that.
Okay, so let's talk about how Baidu plans to reward its shareholders.
Right, let's get into that.
So first up, dividends. Are these sharing the wealth with investors?
So, according to their report, Baidu has never declared or paid any dividends on their ordinary shares.
Oh, okay.
And they don't have any plans to do so in the foreseeable future.
So no dividend checks coming our way anytime soon.
Not likely.
All right, but why not? You'd think with all those profits, they'd want to give something back to the investors.
Well, their reasoning is they believe that reinvesting those funds back into the business is going to lead to higher returns in the long run.
Okay, so they're prioritizing growth over immediate payouts.
That's right.
I mean, I get it. It's a common strategy for companies that are, really focused on long-term value creation.
Exactly.
But still, a little bit disappointing for us dividend-hungry investors.
I hear you.
Okay, so no dividends for now. But what about share buybacks? Are they doing anything to boost the value of their existing shares?
So they do have a share repurchase program in place.
All right.
Their board has authorized the repurchase of up to US $5 billion of their American Depository Shares, or ADSs.
$5 billion, that's a pretty big chunk of change.
It is, yeah.
Does that mean they're obligated to buy back that full amount?
So not exactly. It's important to note that this authorization doesn't obligate them to repurchase any specific amount.
So it's more like a tool they can use at their discretion.
Yeah, it gives them flexibility.
Okay. Speaking of control and flexibility, I noticed a report mentioned something about a dual-class share structure.
Right.
Can you explain what that means for investors?
Sure. So Baidu has two classes of shares, Class A and Class B.
Okay.
Class A shares, the kind you and I would typically buy on the open market, have 1 vote per share. Pretty standard.
Right.
But Class B shares, which are mostly held by co-founder Robin Lai,
Okay.
have 10 votes per share.
10 votes. Wow. So he has a lot of sway over the company.
Yeah, even with a smaller ownership stake, he still has a lot of control over major decisions.
Interesting. Okay, well, before we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to talk about the risks.
Yeah, got to address the elephant in the room.
Because, investing in any company comes with inherent risks,
Absolutely. No investment is risk-free,
and Baidu is no exception.
especially given its complexity.
Yeah, so what are some of the key risks investors should be aware of?
So first and foremost, their corporate structure.
Okay.
It involves something called VIEs, variable interest entities.
VIEs, I've heard of those, but they always kind of make my head spin.
Yeah, they can be a bit confusing.
So what's the main concern with VIEs?
Well, think of a VIE as a kind of roundabout way for foreign investors to invest in certain sectors in China.
Sectors that are typically restricted to domestic ownership.
Right. And Baidu uses VIEs to operate some of its key businesses.
Okay, so it's a workaround.
Yeah. But the concern is that the Chinese government could change how it views and regulates those VIE structures.
Which could have a big impact on Baidu's business.
Exactly. It creates uncertainty for investors.
Makes sense. What other risks should we be thinking about?
Well, Baidu is heavily dependent on the Chinese economy. So any slowdown in China could hurt their business.
That's true. And we can't forget about the competition,
Yeah, the tech industry is incredibly competitive.
especially in China.
Right. They're facing off against some real heavy hitters.
So they need to stay on top of their game.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
So the report also mentions things like intellectual property litigation, cybersecurity threats, data privacy regulations, those kinds of things.
So the usual suspects.
Pretty much.
And then there's the whole issue of Baidu potentially being classified as a PFIC, a passive foreign investment company in the U.S.
Right, which could have some negative tax implications for U.S. investors.
Yeah, not fun.
Definitely something to consider.
So yeah, there are definitely some risks to keep in mind, but for those who are willing to stomach the volatility, Baidu is a company with immense potential.
I agree. They're a major player in some of the fastest growing sectors in the world.
And they're clearly not afraid to make big bets.
They're innovators.
They are, which makes their story all the more fascinating to follow.
It does.
All right, well, that's going to wrap up our deep dive into Baidu's 2023 annual report. It's been a long one, but hopefully you've all learned something new about this complex and ambitious company.
Yeah, it's a company to watch.
For sure. And if you're looking for even more details, be sure to check out the full annual report. We'll have a link in the show notes.
It's dense, but it's a treasure trove of information.
It is. You really get a sense of their strategy and their vision for the future.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they're thinking big.
Big thinkers.
All right, well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next week with another fascinating look at a company shaping the future. Until then, happy investing, everyone.